Shedeur Sanders was seen as one of the biggest wild cards entering the first round of the NFL Draft Thursday. Sanders had a prolific 2024 season. He posted an all-time FBS record with a 71.8 career completion percentage, was not picked during the draft's opening round, and now waits for his fate to be decided heading into today and the start of round 2. In a video posted to social media after the completion of the first round, Sanders admitted he did not expect to go undrafted Thursday, but he appeared to still be positive. All right, there are only 2 quarterbacks drafted last night. Cam Ward, first overall to the Titans, was not a surprise. The Giants trading up to draft Jackson Dart was a surprise, but it's just the second time in the last 10 years where only one quarterback went before pick 25. Here's a warning from Louis Riddick about passing on Sanders.
All the teams that are passing on him right now, as Mel just mentioned, are taking a gamble. They're taking a gamble. The teams who need a quarterback, and if you pass on him and he winds up having a Drew Brees type of career, a Tom Brady type of career, which he's totally capable of. You're going to sit back and teams are going to, there's going to be a lot of revisionist history on him.
I get that.
There's going to be a lot of case studies done on why did people pass on him? Was it because they thought he was cocky? Was it because of his dad? Was it because he was too brat? All the other nonsense that you hear. Because it isn't because of how he plays the game.
I agree with you.
Strong sound right there. Marcus, why did Shedeur not get drafted in the first round?
Because 32 teams didn't think he was good enough to get drafted in the first round. And some teams didn't need a quarterback. Some teams thought other positions were more valuable. And here's the thing, and I said this earlier today, man. I get everybody, because we've talked about Shedeur Sanders ad nauseum for the last 3 years when him and Prime and Travis Hunter showed up to Jackson State. We talked about the tandem. He coaching his father, Shedeur. They transfer and they go to Colorado, and Shedeur plays well. They win the TCU game. Everybody going crazy. They make Colorado relevant. All of those things have transpired all the way up until this point where we get to the draft. And when you start evaluating and teams look at this, and let me say this, the media didn't have one pick in the first round last night. Nobody called us to ask us, should they take Shedeur or should they take Cam Ward or should they trade up to get Travis Hunter? Nobody did that. These teams looked at it and they said, we don't feel like the value is there to take Shedeur Sanders in the first round. There was a team that traded up in the New York Giants that didn't feel like he was good enough for them to take him with the 26th pick. So that's that in that scenario. Here's the other thing. When you start thinking about and this is why sports is so great. As much as we could want to see it for him, and I'm sure teams have come back and said, I regretted not taking this guy. You think Chicago ain't say it after they've seen what Patrick Mahomes has done? You don't think the Giants regret even though it might have not made a difference in the championship, what they saw Saquon Barkley do in Philly? So I understand it. This is primetime Deion Sanders' son, who played the position really, really good for the Colorado Buffaloes. They won more games, brought more attention, more eyes were focused. But when 32 teams last night were on the clock, and the teams that needed a quarterback were on the clock, they did not think Shedeur Sanders at that point, which I think he'll get drafted tonight or even in the third round, had enough value for them to use that pick to pick him. That's all it boils down to. Now, we can get into the game and why we think these things happen, but that's ultimately what we watched transpire last night.
2 words, evaluation and projection. And that's what the first round is about. And so, Marcus, you heard me say to Stephen A. Malley, one, can we stop having the funeral for Shedeur right now? Can we stop? He didn't get drafted in the first round. He very well might get drafted in the first 5 picks tonight. And candidly, it could be a better situation for him. So it's not the end of his story. Marcus and I were watching the draft last night with MK and a couple other people, and we're sitting there, and the reality set in of it did kind of stink, because what should be a celebratory story and really cool and inspiring story has turned into this negative narrative and this somber thing. And I'm sure there's a downtrodden feeling about it in the Sanders family. I'm sure it is, because it is a great story. The journey of him and his dad together, it is, and hopefully tonight they'll get to celebrate that, okay? I'm gonna keep it on the field, just as the player and the tape. Years ago, Joe Burrow's last year at LSU, before the season started, there's no way anybody said Joe Burrow was going to be the #1 pick in the NFL draft 6 months after the season. But the evaluation process and the play that year led to that. Last year, before the college football season in 2023, no one was saying that Jaden Daniels was going to be the 2nd pick of the NFL draft before that year that he had at LSU. But the tape that year and the evaluation process brought him to that. Cam Ward was not the #1 pick in September. But the tape and then the evaluation process led to that. And so when you evaluate, and this is what, and Stephen A., you've heard me say this, NFL teams don't really evaluate the college kids during the season. They evaluate all the NFL guys. And then the season ends and the evaluation process starts. And when you just were evaluating, you saw good. And you saw a player that was good. And teams decided that they didn't believe that the evaluation was worthy of a first-round pick, nor the projection of what he would be was worthy of a first-round pick. That's just where they are. Maybe he'll go 37 to the Raiders tonight.
And to the producers, I need you to leave Dan Orlovsky and Swagoo up on that screen while I'm talking, because I want to see them during this soliloquy I'm about to drop on you. Dan Orlovsky, I get where you're coming from. And you're right. When we look at Shedeur Sanders, is he as mobile as Cam Ward? No. Does he have the arm strength and the athleticism of a Cam Ward? No. Does he have the size? No. He doesn't have those things. They talked about him having the accuracy as a passer en route to throwing for over 4,000 yards and throwing 37 touchdowns and 10 interceptions. They talked about his toughness because he stood in the pocket and took 94 sacks over his 2 seasons in Colorado. They talked about his poise. They talked about that it factor that he has, particularly when you consider who his dad is and how great of a player and athlete his dad was, and they pointed to that. And they pointed to all those intangibles. Dan Orlovsky, Swagoo, y'all know this better than me. When we talk about the quarterback position, we rave about attributes like that. Am I lying? I don't think I am. And then suddenly, here comes Shedeur Sanders. And those things are being said about him. And then his cachet diminishes week by week by week. Dan Orlovsky, respectfully, where I disagree with you, although I know you're not doing it intentionally, is you're asking us to prioritize the football evaluation, which is the right thing to ask us to do. But what's wrong about what you're saying is that it's almost as if you want us to bypass all the stuff that was said about him leading up to the draft. I am a person that remembers when Warren Sapp's value was diminished and he had to sit there for the draft because of reports that had came out prior to that draft and how his draft stock dropped and how so many of us lamented it. He wasn't the only one that had happened to. But the Eagles ended up drafting Mike Mamula. How'd that work out? Look at the career Warren Sapp had and how legit that brother was on the football field. We got to remember stuff like that. Why? Because even though that draws no comparison to Shedeur Sanders in terms of behavior or anything like that, that's not where I'm going. What I'm talking about is what the media was saying, what was being reported, the anonymous stuff that was being thrown out there. What do they say about Shedeur Sanders? All of a sudden, he shows up at the scouting combine. He doesn't work out. Oh, the meetings, it was the arrogance and all of this other stuff. I'm saying forget all of that. I believe that the biggest issue in all of this was primetime Deion Sanders and the thought of having to deal with him. I just read something this morning where they literally said, you know what? One of the things that folks had a concern about is, were they really getting the truth out of the program? Because when you go to a program and you ask about a particular player, you can get all the intel. But in this particular instance, because he was being coached by his dad, folks weren't confident that they were getting the right, accurate information about him. All I'm saying, fellas, is that it's hard for me to sit here today and to listen to and to watch a dude that was once projected to be one of the top 2 picks, potentially in the draft, to drop completely out of the first round and to ignore all those reports that had come out about him.
Everything you're saying is valid. Can I just say something in defense of Dan? And Dan, I know you could speak for yourself. I don't think you were by any means excusing what happened to him in terms of knocking him for the off the field. I mean, anything on the field. I think what Dan is saying is looking ahead, and I know how Deion Sanders is built, and I'm assuming his son as well, that this can be a blessing in disguise. This can be all things work together for our good. This can be a Tom Brady six-rounder, chip on my shoulder. The journey makes the better story. So, like, looking ahead, you could be in a better situation. So the story isn't written yet. This could actually be a positive fuel for the fire, and he can ultimately have an even better career. It does not excuse. It does not excuse at all, Stephen A.
Molly,
or Marcus at all what was done to this man.
That's not the point.
Okay.
The point is where we're living at today. We know the future's bright because he's going to have a chance. And I know that you weren't saying it. I'm not casting any aspersions on you, Dan. I'm simply saying this young man coming into the pro, sure, we can look beyond it once he gets drafted. But that moment that was supposed to occur last night, that was supposed to exist last night, if you think that I'm going to sit here and assume that that was strictly an evaluation about his football skills alone that led to him falling out the entire first round without his father having an impact, I don't buy that. I don't buy it.
Okay.
Dan,
Dan,
Marcus?
go ahead, because please, I can't wait. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, Marcus, you go. Marcus, you go.
Go ahead, Marcus.
No, Marcus, go. We haven't heard from you.
Listen. Stephen A., I understand where you're coming from. But the reality of this has always been, because you mentioned Warren Sapp. Bro, do you know what Warren Sapp tape looked like? You could have said Warren, like, do you understand that he had traits and things that you could not coach? That's what we've been talking about. His talent was still going to get him drafted in the first round. No,
but I'm saying how he dropped. That's my point. But he had dropped and he had sat there long, and that was the story that day.
Stephen A., players drop, all right? Let me use another example that you're very familiar with. Lamar Jackson was the Heisman Trophy winner. Lamar Jackson had good completion percentage. He was a superior athlete, as we know at Louisville, like we know right now. Lamar Jackson, and tape was crazy. And he actually wasn't going to go in the first round until Baltimore traded up to get him. And you know why Baltimore traded up to get him? With all of the stuff that was out about him, is because he had things that were different about everybody else. We are reserving the fact that Shedeur Sanders dropped out of the first round, and people want to create this conversation like it has something to do with his attitude or it has something to do with prime. Yes, that can cause you to drop. But if you got crazy talent, bro, some team would have took him in the first round if they felt like, I don't care. Because there are GMs, there are coaches that say, hey, look, man, I know there's baggage. I know whatever people think. I know what people are saying. I don't see the talent for us to come and get him based on the things that's been said. Stephen A., I have not heard you or Dan or anyone on this network say Shedeur Sanders is not a good quarterback. But we got to stop with this narrative, like the things that were said about him caused him to not get taken in the first round, and he had this immense elite talent that these other guys had.
I appreciate the education. So just to make sure I encapsulate this, right? So Jackson Dart, who the only person I heard mention him was Dan Orlovsky about being taken ahead of Shedeur Sanders. So we're going to remember that we're looking at New Orleans. Derek Carr's got a shoulder injury, and the quarterback position is supposed to be so important. We're going to remember that Cleveland has got Joe Flacco and Kenny Pickett, and the Pittsburgh Steelers have Mason Rudolph and Skylar Thompson. I just want to make sure that we're clear. I'll defer to y'all, Marcus. I'll defer to you, Dio. No problem. But I just gave you 4 different scenarios where normally somebody in those conditions would grab a quarterback.
Can I say one thing before you go? And Stephen A., I just want to look at you when I say this. I know we're on the camera here. To their point about teams drafting players with a multitude of sins, think of the baggage of players that have been drafted, the types of things, the baggage, and teams are still willing to take them based on talent.
Okay. And my response to that would be, covering sports for decades, I've also seen executives pass on individuals because of the potential headaches they believe will occur by picking somebody, which is why I bring up Deion Sanders.
Okay.
You don't want somebody in your face or in a position to compromise your leadership because they know so much about the game themselves. I understand.
If you're that, what I'm saying though, Stephen A, what I'm saying though, Stephen A, if you're that talented, you're going to look past that.
Okay.
When they look
Okay.
past police blotters.
Okay. All right. Listen, Swagoo played. Dio played. Y'all know. All I'm saying is I can give you evidence of executives in sports who've made decisions they should not
But
have
Stephen
made
A.
for things
Stephen
that
A.
extend beyond.
Stephen
But
A.
Stephen A. That,
Okay. Marcus, then
Go
Dan.
ahead, Dio.
Marcus, then Dan.
Okay. Stephen A., you know people are going to listen to you and take this out of context. People are going to say Stephen A. believes Shedeur didn't get drafted in the first round because Prime is his dad and all of these other things that start to come out. And the whole point is, and I have a hard time bringing these certain things up, but Stephen A., you've sat longer and watched drafts than I have, and Dan have. Stephen A., Laramie Tunsil, there was a picture of Laramie Tunsil with a weed mask on.
Yeah.
The day of the draft.
I remember.
And he fell and still was taken in the first round. You know why? Because people thought he would be a stalwart left tackle, and he showed things at Ole Miss that scouts and GM said, man, I don't care. And all I'm trying to get people to understand is, and you're not wrong. There are teams, there are general managers that have taken personal vendettas against players and would not draft them. I have never seen 31 other ones look at a player and say, well, he got enough talent for me.
That's hyperbole.
I don't care.
Because you're not 31 teams didn't need a quarterback. I just gave you 4.
Well,
I just gave you 4. That doesn't mean everybody
the
needs
other
them.
5.
Okay,
Stephen
But
A.
we're saying they'll turn a blind eye to police blotters is our point. They can get over that Deion's his dad. Go ahead, Dan.
Right. Yeah. So here's, first of all, other guys that didn't get drafted last night because of some off the field stuff. You started to hear names from people that were in the know saying this guy's going to drop because of some of the interviews or some of the information that teams had. So it's not just solely singular to one player. If that was the case, Stephen A. And I don't agree with this. I disagree with your perspective on this, that he didn't get drafted because Deion is his dad. But if that was the case, again, I don't think it was. Is that the team's fault? Is that the team's fault? Is that the organization's responsibility? No. That's not, like, they're allowed to make that decision. Again, I disagree with it. Here's the thing, Stephen. You rattled off 4 teams. You rattled off 4 teams that needed quarterbacks, that you absolutely could justify need quarterbacks, and 3 of them are like blue bloods. You're telling me the Pittsburgh Steelers and the New York Giants and the Cleveland Browns and the New Orleans Saints all needed quarterbacks. You can make the case that first-round pick was worthy of it, and all 4 of them chose not to for things other than outside the play, for reasons other than outside of the ability.
No,
all
I'm
4
not.
of them.
I'm not accusing them. I'm not accusing that of being the sole reason that it happened. I'm saying what you're saying in terms of his talent, and it may not have been off the charts compared to somebody like a Cam Ward. But I found it very alarming that we're talking about 1, 3, 6, 9, then the 21, then the 26, and then ultimately he falls out of the first round. I don't think it was just about what they've seen on the field, because I think you saw enough from him on the field for him to get picked in the first round. That's my personal opinion. But obviously, I get where y'all are coming from, and I understand that.
We all agree with that, but predominantly we're saying it's the play. Go ahead, Marcus.
Yeah, we agree with the fact that all of those factors are measured in with players.
Yeah.
Of course they are.
All of it.
Yeah, we're just saying if we're looking at the pizza.
You don't think teams...
It's not the majority of the pie. Go ahead, Dan.
You don't think teams at the most important position in all of professional sports would want a unbelievably talented player that comes from an unbelievable NFL family? You know how great that would be for those organizations and the NFL?
That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is Shedeur Sanders was perceived as being a first-round talent. So my point is it off the charts? No. Could you justify moving beyond him? Fine. I'm just saying he was a first-round talent, and I don't believe for 1 second that It's just purely football reasons as to why
Okay.
this man fell out of the first round.
All right.